Imagine for a moment that you woke up tomorrow morning and discovered that you had an extra checking account. Wouldn't that be good? Yeah. And in this checking account, this extra checking account that you didn't know you had, was all the money that you've ever wasted in your life. Some of you are already thinking of that new pickup or that in-ground pool you're going to have built, right? Because for many of us, there's a lot of money in that account. And when I say wasted, let me be clear. I'm talking about all the money that you bad habited away on a vice or a habit, all the money that you consumer debted away, all the money that you borrowed and spent on stuff that you don't even have or use anymore. In fact, some of you are making payments on things that you don't even have, you don't even know where they're at anymore. All the money that you spent on things that you wore once and it's been hanging in the closet ever since. All those shoes you bought and wore once or twice, Sarah Clam. All those can't do without, got to have items that you bought, in some instances even financed. Now you're not even sure where they're at. So imagine waking up tomorrow morning with a checking account that had all the money that you ever squandered or wasted in your life. But here's the catch. The only thing that you can do with that money is give it away. You could give it away immediately in a one-time gift, or you could give it away over time. But you had to give it all away. Now, come on. I mean, after the shock of realizing how much you've squandered, how fun would that be? How fun would that be to go around and be a financial blessing to others? Hang on to that thought. We're going to come back to it in just a minute. We're wrapping up our Firm Foundation series this morning that we began about 8 years ago. Actually, I think it's 12 weeks ago or something like that. But we've been looking at some basic Bible principles that if we'll apply them, that's a huge phrase, if we'll apply them, will transform our lives and equip us to do what God's called us to do and change us into the people that God's called us to be. Things like Bible reading, things like worship, prayer, witnessing, the Holy Spirit. We spent 2 weeks talking about the Holy Spirit, and just these different things. And this morning we're gonna tie a bow on this series by looking at the topic of generosity. You knew that a preacher couldn't do a series without talking about money, right? So this is on the topic of generosity, and the title of this final message is Live Generous. Live Generous. And I know all you English majors just cringed when I said that because the proper wording should be live generously. But I left the ly off on purpose because for the next few minutes I want to contrast the idea of be generous with live generous because they're two completely different things. See, all of us know how to be generous in the moment. All of us know how to do that. But what we're talking about this morning is different than being generous in the moment. I don't need to spend a lot of time here because you guys know how this works in this day and age. I mean, all you have to do, you could be sitting at work, think of something that you need. You open up your smartphone, open up the Amazon app, you swipe to the right, and sometimes that thing that you ordered is on your porch when you get home, right? Isn't that amazing? I mean, seriously, that's kind of scary when you think about it. But that just kind of gives you an idea of how we're just kind of driven, pushed into this consumer society and consumer culture. And so that's why it's so easy for us to be consumed by our consumption, which makes us more and more self-centered, which is the antithesis of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. So today I want to talk about what it means to not be generous, but live generous. This isn't a message on giving. You guys already know how to give. Everybody knows how to give. In fact, part of the problem is that Americans can easily confuse generosity with random acts of giving. But random acts of giving are not generosity. Random acts of giving are random acts of giving. And the way to understand the difference is similar to how we all consider ourselves to be good people, right? You all consider yourselves to be good people, well, don't you? I think most people would. I mean, you're a good person, right? Two of you think you're a good person, right? Is that a trick question, right? In fact, if I were to say to you, you know what? I don't think you're a good person. You would immediately think of something that you did, some act, And you would cite that as proof that you are a good person, right? You say, because I did this, no. Because I did this, I'm a good person. See, all you married folks, you're going to thank me for coming this morning just for what I'm about to tell you here. But all you married folks, this is why you'll never win an argument with your spouse. You don't even go there. It's not going to happen. Because whatever you accuse him or whatever you accuse her of doing, they're immediately going to think of a time when they did do that or didn't do that thing that you said that they never did or did. How come you never helped me around the house? What do you mean, never helped you around the house? 2 weeks ago Monday, after supper, after watching the golf highlights on ESPN, I went in and emptied the dishwasher without being told. Boom. Right? So I do something for you, right? See, we do the same thing with giving. We think of a time that we gave, and we think that makes us a generous person. So my goal this morning is to show you that random acts of giving does not equate to generosity. And when I begin to show you this, your tendency is going to be to push back. You're going to think of a time, no. I gave, there was this cause over there and I gave to that. You're going to think of a time that you made a donation or a contribution when somebody asked you. But no, that's not what we're talking about. See, most Americans participate in some random acts of giving. Most Americans can be generous in the moment, but most Americans are not living generous. And I think part of the confusion surrounding the idea of generosity is because of some of the misconceptions that we have about generosity. So I want us to begin by looking at 4 myths surrounding this idea of generosity. Myth number 1, spontaneity. Generous. Because, look, think about it. Greedy people will give spontaneously if they think that it will help them or if they feel pressure, if they think people are watching. Spontaneous giving, look, you know this. Spontaneous giving is usually emotion-based, isn't it? Spontaneous giving is usually emotionally based. That's why the ASPCA, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, hired Sarah McLachlan to sing In the Arms of an Angel, while showing that clip of all those abused animals. Anyone seen that commercial? Yeah. Doesn't it just rip your heart out? We used to tell our dogs when they acted up, you're this close to being in a Sarah McLachlan commercial, you better. Not really, I'm just. Talk about an emotional appeal. Really, did it work? According to the ASPCA, whatever they call that single commercial was their most successful fundraiser.
Always true to his word, and his word says that he will.
In 30 million of that 50 million. When you stir the emotions, people are more likely to give. And the more emotions, the more people give. And that's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. That's not a bad thing. But don't mistake that for being generous. That's not generosity. Myth number 2, generosity is regulated by cash flow. That's a myth as well. See, what usually happens when someone makes an appeal for a donation or you're given an opportunity to give is you immediately think of how much money is in your wallet or in your checking account or in your purse to give, right? You say, how much money do I have access to right now? And if you don't have access to it, then your response in those moments is going to be, you know what, I'd really like to help, but I can't do that right now. Which meant your context for giving was what you had in the moment, right? Do you see that? Don't lose me here, this is important. You wanted to help, your heart was right, but you just weren't in a position to give. What you had in the moment determined what you could give in the moment. But people who live generous avoid that predicament. And I'll talk about why in just a minute. Myth number 3 is the amount is what counts. That's not true either. Because see, you can't understand dollars without context. You cannot understand dollars without context. Me or you giving $1,000 is different than Clark Hunt or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates giving $1,000, right? See, for most of us, that's going to be a little bit of a sacrifice. For them, that's chump change. They probably wouldn't even recognize it, right? Amount doesn't determine generosity. We hear someone say, well, they gave a generous gift. What does that mean? Really, what does that mean? You know, what we think is a generous gift might be what other people will spend tomorrow night going out to dinner, right? Generosity is not about the amount. In fact, Jesus actually addressed this mindset once in a famous story that you probably heard if you grew up in the church. He was at the temple one day. He's with his disciples, and he's watching as people coming into the temple were dropping their offering into the offering, whatever they used, bag, box, whatever they used there. And he's watching these people, and talked about the wealthy people. How did he know they were wealthy? Because of how they dressed and because of how much they dropped into the offering, right? So Jesus is watching this, and the disciples are with him. And then at one point, while this is going on, it says that this old, poor widow came up. She was in line with everyone else. And she dropped just a couple of small little coins. We call them the widow's mite, right? So Jesus is intently watching this. And then when this woman comes on and drops this, he says, guys, come here. Guys, come here. And he points at that widow. And he said, what she gave right there is more than everyone else has given. And the way that that's constructed in the Greek is, what it means is more than everyone else combined. More than everyone else combined. And his disciples are thinking, wait, what? What kind of math is that? And Jesus would say, that's kingdom math. That's kingdom math. God's not impressed by amounts. God is moved by percentages. Someone once said, we measure our giving by what we give, but God measures our giving by what we keep. Aren't you glad you came to church today? Jesus tells the disciples, all these people gave their gifts out of their wealth. In other words, they had a lot left over. They gave some percentage, right? But she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had to live on, so she gave more than everybody else. She was the most generous person at the temple that day, because when it comes to generosity, the amount is not what counts. Percentage is what counts. Myth number 4 about generosity. Rich people are generous. No, they're not. Rich people are rich. That doesn't make them generous, right? The two aren't necessarily the same. In fact, there's no necessary correlation between the two. The truth is, poor people are generally far more generous than wealthy people. Here's why. Poor people aren't trying to save their way out of poverty. Poor people don't have a saving plan. That's not even on their radar, right? Because they're living on the edge. They're just trying to get by. Poor people are dialed in to those people who are living on the edge because that's where they're at. That's where they're living at the moment. So oftentimes, the poorer the person is, the more generous they actually are, because their thinking is, you know what, if I help them now in their time of need, maybe they'll help me in my time of need. So oftentimes, the poorer the person is, the more generous they actually are. So generous living, what does that look like? It's not the amount. It's not responding to an ask. It's something entirely different. What is it? For the sake of our study this morning, I'm defining living generous this way. Living generous is the premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation of financial assets. That's okay. You can hold your applause. Don't worry about that, right? The premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation of financial assets. All right, let's go back through those, and I kind of unpack those. Premeditated. In order to live generous, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan, which leads us to our main idea for this morning's message. Generous people have a plan. Generous people have a plan. Doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. If you don't have a plan, you won't be generous. Furthermore, you'll never realize how much you can give. You can actually give if you don't have a plan. You have to have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, you're going to be what we call a triple S giver. And a triple S giver gives spontaneously, sporadically, and sparingly. If you have no plan, you'll be a triple S giver, spontaneous, sporadic, and sparing. If you don't have a plan, you're going to gravitate towards being a consumer. And you'll never give as much as you could have if you would have had a plan. author and financial guru Ron Blue, said there's basically only 5 things that we can do with our money. We can spend it, we can repay debt, we can pay our taxes, we can save it, and we can give it. All right? Now, what's interesting is when you look closely at that list, I think you'll discover that it pretty much mirrors most of our approach to money as well, which is me first, creditors second, government third, me fourth, and others last. And actually, if you think about it, it should be me second as well. Because the things that we're paying debt on, the consumer debt, is usually things that we bought for us, right? Come on, right? So if that's the case, then the order really should be me, government, me, and others. It's kind of incriminating, isn't it? Whether you're a person of faith or not, right? See, if you think, oh, I'm a generous person. No. If giving to others is last, you're not a generous person because you put yourself ahead of pretty much everyone else. So, again, if you're not a person of faith, that's up to you what you do with this. But if you are a person of faith, listen, this is important. If you call yourself a Christian, you absolutely cannot live that way. If that is a reflection of how you spend your money, you need to have a come to Jesus meeting, and here's why. If Jesus taught and modeled anything, he taught us to put others first, right? Which means, don't lose me, which means you can't follow Jesus if other people in your life are last. Because the whole idea of following Jesus was and still is built on the premise that he put us first and asked us to do the same with others. See, this is why Jesus talks so much about money. Money and possessions, quicker than anything else, expose what's in our heart. Because where your treasure is, there your heart is going to be. And Jesus knew this. Look, Jesus didn't need anyone's money. He was only on this planet, a few years. He didn't even have time to spend money. But he understood the power of money. And he understood that if his Father's kingdom was going to be first in our practical everyday lives, his Father's kingdom had to be first in our practical everyday finances as well. Because those are the areas where we be touched. Jesus said, "For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." And if you're going to follow me, how dare you put giving at the end of the line? Actually, he didn't say that. I said that last part. But it's implied. It's implied. Seriously, what does that say about your appreciation and your confidence in God? When it's me, government, me, and then others. Let's move on to the next point. Turn to the person next to you and say, I'm glad we're moving on from this. Go ahead. Premeditated. To live generous, you have to have a plan. To live generous, you also have to be calculating. Calculated. See, here's what generous people think. Generous people pre-decide what they're going to give. That's what calculated means. Generous people pre-decide. They don't want to be asked to see, what's in their purse or in their wallet or their checking account. They don't have to do that. Well, let me talk to the wife first and see if we're giving. No, not that you shouldn't talk to your spouse about giving, but no. Generous people, they've already pre-decided. And that decision has already been made for them. See, to live generous, you have to have a plan and you have to pre-decide an amount. In other words, be a percentage giver. Third, designated. Generous people not only predetermine an amount, they also predetermine where they're going to give that amount. Generous people don't have to be asked. Generous people are proactive. This doesn't mean you don't give sporadically. I mean, you can give sporadically. This doesn't mean that you don't give spontaneously, because you can give spontaneously, but that's not generous living. That's like add-on giving. And if you're not sure where to give, here's a tip. Always give from a grateful heart and a broken heart. So ask yourself these two questions. What am I grateful for? and what breaks my heart. So, question, what are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? See, this question really has to do with the things that benefit you ultimately. So as you look at your life right now, what things are you grateful for? What things, what organizations, what events have benefited you and your family that you're grateful for? Are you grateful for a local business? Support it. Support that business. Are you grateful for our school? Support that school. Are you grateful for the church? If so, you should have a plan for giving to the local church. Money seems to be a lightning rod of criticism for the church, and you know, in a lot of cases, that's you know, well-founded. The church has only itself to blame for much of that criticism. But here's what you need to know. It doesn't matter how much money the church does or doesn't have. This isn't about need. This isn't about need. This is about gratitude. Are you grateful for your local church? Do you and your family benefit from the local church? If so, then you should have a plan for supporting the local church that you attend. If you attend, participate in a local church, and you don't have a plan for how you support your local church financially, I'm sorry, you're ungrateful. No, Pastor. No. I have gratitude in my heart. Nobody cares about gratitude in your heart. Your kids don't care about gratitude in your heart. Your boss doesn't care about gratitude. Your creditors don't care about gratitude in you. I'm grateful for my house. Well, then you better send in that mortgage payment. No, I'm grateful in my heart. Right? No one cares about gratitude in your heart. Listen, unexpressed gratitude is ingratitude. OMG, did he just say that? Unexpressed gratitude is ingratitude. If you're grateful for your church, you should support it. We show our gratitude with our money. And if you have a plan, if you've already designated it, and it's painless at that point because you've already predetermined and predecided, and you're proactive, and you don't have to wait to be asked, right? Everybody should have a plan for how they support the local church. Financially, yes, but also with your time and service. That's why we promote the next classes so often and so frequently. We want to get you invested, not just financially, but with your time and your talents as well. So, what are you grateful for? And then beyond that, you want to ask this question, what breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What stirs or breaks my heart? Is it the 9 million children who go to bed hungry each night here in North America? Maybe it's those innocent young people that Kyle was talking about in Chiang Mai, Thailand, who've gotten caught up in the sex traffic industry. Maybe it's the homeless. Maybe it's the foster care program that's a mess. For Sue and I, one of the things in both of these categories of what we're grateful for and what breaks our heart would be Marriage Encounter. We're grateful for what it did in our marriage, but it also breaks our heart to see so many couples that we went to Bible school with and seminary with, who in some cases aren't even in ministry anymore, and sadly, in many cases, are not even married anymore. And that breaks our heart. So we support it because we're grateful for it and because it's a cause that breaks our heart. And so Marriage Encounter doesn't have to send us a letter each month. Marriage Encounter doesn't have to invite us to some nice meal with an emotional PowerPoint sales pitch, because generous people don't have to be asked. Generous people are giving based on what they're grateful for and what breaks their heart. And anytime that you can marry your giving with your passion and your time together, that's a win. That's a win for you. So what breaks your heart? Find somebody in that space who's doing a great job and support them, because that's what connects your heart to your giving. But you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to be ready. If you don't have a plan, you'll be inconsistent. If you don't have a plan, you'll be thinking, how much money do we have there? And, can we do this? And when you have a plan, and this is probably one of the best reasons to have a plan. When you have a plan, you'll feel better about saying no to other sales pitches and solicitations. See, generous people don't feel guilty about saying no because they've already said yes. Because they've already said yes. Generous people don't feel guilty because generous people aren't emotional givers. Generous people have a plan. They've already said yes to something that they're grateful for, something that breaks their heart, and they've already picked a percentage to give towards that cause. Look, I know this is a tough message for many of you. I get it. It took me way longer than it should have to begin to trust God with my finances, with our finances, and to begin trying to live generous. And look, we have a long way to go. We're still trying to dial this in about what it means to live generous, and I'm still learning. We're still learning. But here's what I want you to understand. I'm not asking you to do anything that we're not doing. I'm not asking you to do anything that we aren't doing. We're not where we want to be, but I'll tell you this, we're a whole lot better at living generous now than we used to be. Because as we've stepped out and trusted God more, he's come through for us every time, every time. You know, there was a time when it was all we could do to pay our tithe. Maybe every now and then we could give a special offering or something like that. But I'm telling you what, you know, with 5 kids growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, right? Now, where we're at, in addition to tithing we tithe to the church. I tithe to our district. The money that I make from the church, I tithe off of that to support our district because that's how that's set up. We tithe to Marriage Encounter each month. We started giving to Nick and Kennedy Topping, the couple that have led worship for us, and they feel called to Salt Lake City to reach out to the Mormon community. So we pick them up. We're sending them a monthly gift. Not to mention the few students that have contacted us. We got a letter from sometimes Wellsville students who had an opportunity to go on a missions trip, and so they send a letter to, you know, talk about the trip and to pray for them and, you know, ask if we could, you know, for financial support. And there was a time we couldn't have done that. We would have wanted to, but we couldn't have done that. But now we can do that. Now, could we do better? Absolutely. But I tell you what, we're doing it more than we used to. See, that's the key. Don't compare where you're at with other people. You compare where you're at with where you used to be. That's when you begin to realize, man, truly, God is amazing. Last night, Sue and I were sitting outside enjoying the beautiful evening. Wasn't it beautiful last night? Colorado weather, you know, 70, low 70s. And she's over, you know, messing with the flowers in the garden. And I'm sitting there in a lawn chair, and I'm just looking out and the sun's setting. And I just kind of got this picture of, you know, when we first moved to town, we lived here in town for 14 years. And Sue would always tell me, honey, I'd like to move out into the country. And I'd always tell her, honey, Wellsville is the country. Right? I mean, that's kind of how I thought. You know, I didn't help her much, but, you know, that was always, you know, my reply. But seriously, I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at our beautiful home, 3.5 acres. I even got a John Deere zero-turn 54-inch deck to cut those 3.5 acres. Got a couple of cars in the garage, got a pickup. I mean, seriously, I just got this moment of, look at what the Lord has done. Because I look at where we were at. And, you know, at the time, it's not like, you know, we don't want to be here. It's not that. It's just that when you put God first, man, little by little by little by little, he'll help you learn what it means to live generous. It's an oversimplification, I know. But the simplest way to organize your financial life, and this is really for a different sermon, but 3 steps. If you want to learn to live generous, you got to do these things. First, give. Second, save. And third, live. Live on the rest. Give, save, and live. For God so loved the world that he gave. That's what people who love do. That's what grateful people do. That's what passionate people do. That's what organized people do. So I'm challenging you to begin living generous. So again, back to where we started. Imagine if you had this checking account with all the money that you ever wasted or squandered. Just think of all the good that you can do, how much you could just bless so many different people by going out and blessing them. I'm telling you, dear ones, you have no idea what your giving capacity is until you put a plan together. And look, if this scares you, it shouldn't. It really shouldn't scare you. What should scare you is living another season of your life without a plan. That should scare you. That's what should scare you. Because generous people are the happiest people. Jesus said it this way. He said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And you know what? He wasn't kidding. He really wasn't kidding when he said that. Blessed means happy. You can't consume your way to happiness because you've already tried. It can't be done, can it? Because you're made in the image of Creator God. And he says, you want to be happy? Then here's how you do it. You flip the script on how you manage your money. And if you do that, you'll save more, you'll consume less, and you'll give more, and you'll be happier. And that's a fact. Now, to be clear, because I've been accused of preaching a prosperity gospel, so let me be clear about this. Living generous isn't giving to get. It's not giving to get. You won't be blessed in the sense of, you gave God $1 and he gave you 10. I don't believe that for a second. You live in the United States of America, for goodness sake. When you think about what's going on in the world, if you live in America, you've already won the lottery. If you live in America, you're wealthier than 94% of the people in the world. So this isn't about giving to get. This is about giving because you've been given to. It's about the power of a plan, the power of percentage. And this is what it means to follow Jesus with our finances. So, some questions to keep the discussion going through this week, and then I want to pray for you. Who do you know that lives generously? And what makes you think that about them? When you think of someone that you would consider that lives generously, then, okay, what is it about them that would cause you to say that about them? Second, do you have a generosity plan? Third, if you don't currently have a plan, what's holding you back from deciding to give away a percentage of your income? And then fourth question, what are you grateful for? Or what breaks your heart? Does your generosity reflect your answer to those two questions? Bow your head and let me pray for you. Father, based on what you've done for and given to us, how can we not be generous people? Give us wisdom to know what to do with what we've just heard and the courage to do it. As we look to you, help us put a plan together as we predetermine a percentage to give and no longer live spontaneous, sporadic, and sparing lives. And while your heads are still bowed, if you're here this morning and you're not in a right relationship with God, or maybe you've never been given the opportunity to receive God's forgiveness through Jesus Christ, or maybe you did at one time, but something happened and you're not living the life that he has for you. And you know it. You know it. In fact, that's why you're here this morning. If that's you, it would be my honor to lead you in a prayer where you can come to the Father or come back to the Father. Because just like the father in the story of the prodigal son, it says that when the wayward son came to his senses and he was coming back home, one of the most emotional verses in the whole Bible, Luke 15:20, tells us that when the prodigal was walking back home down the road, it says while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. In other words, he had to be looking for him. How else could he see him? He had to be looking for him. I want you to know your Father's been looking for you. He's not mad at you. In fact, he's been looking for you. So if that's you and you're ready to come home, come back to the Father, I would ask you to just pray this simple prayer with me. Just say, Jesus, I know that my life is broken and I can't fix it. I've tried. Forgive me for my sins. Thank you for dying for me so I can have abundant life now and eternal life with you forever. I believe Jesus is the Son of God, that he died for me, that he rose from the dead 3 days later. Thank you, Lord, for that resurrection life. And Father, fill me with your Holy Spirit and help me begin living my life for you from this day forward. In Jesus' name.